All right, I see you. And we're on. It's not on because, could you see me?
You're good.
Oh, it is doing it. Okay. All right, there we go. All right. Okay, so this is Benjamin Geyman's and Rachel Rivera's project for social justice related to Carper's fundamental patterns of knowing. So the question is asked, has nursing lost its way with regard to acting for social justice? I think on the contrary, nurses are a key partner in understanding, educating, and advocating for populations of people everywhere. Nurses are in a unique position to observe, study, and make recommendations for the health and wellness of individuals and communities. In the article, Unreconciled Inconsistencies by Beckmeyer and Butterfield, they contend that the national nursing documents that define nursing practice were too individualistic and not broad enough to encompass the whole of the community, but rather competed with each other. The main complaint that Beckmeyer and Butterfield had with the practice guidelines was that they need to be stationary enough in the basis to stand the test of time for nurses to know how to practice always. Reflecting on our nursing practice is important, even though it can be challenging, reflecting can increase the level of care that the nurse is able to provide. In How Experienced Providers Gain Knowledge, Vaughn, Article 2014, reflects on the importance of understanding the whole picture. Vaughn also discusses that Carper's fundamental patterns of knowing are key guidelines to better understanding the practice of nursing through experience. We have a responsibility to understand the individual patient as well as the needs of the communities we serve. Beckmeyer and Butterfield feel that the main documents guiding the nursing practice need a broader scope in order to include care for all and thus achieve social justice. The idea of Carper's fundamentals of knowledge have to do with four key aspects. Empirics has to do with knowledge and understanding the tangible, such as the factual scientific knowledge, basic things that can be studied or reproduced. Ethics deals with the moral judgment, like the right or wrong of treatment. Aesthetics is personal intuition experience. It's the knowledge that someone gains through life experiences. And personal knowledge then deals with knowing and trusting of the self. And that instinct or gut feeling we all seem to have in nursing when something does not seem right. Vaughn wanted to use these aspects in her research to better help holistic care. The first opinion is mine, and I feel that nursing has not lost its way with regard to social justice. On the contrary, nurses continue to find new ways to care for every individual in the community. It's this commitment to understanding the art of nursing that defines our practice, and it is the individual care we give to every patient that makes up the care for all. Yet, we cannot forget to interpret the whole picture. Because nurses are viewed as a profession that is trusted with wellness, health, and even lives, we have an obligation to promote equity in the distribution of healthcare resources to everyone in the community. But while we must fulfill our part of the work in social justice in providing healthcare for all, regardless of any factor, and although we can partner with the community and individuals to assess and predict the needs and resources for those needs, we as nurses are not solely responsible for the availability of healthcare resources to the community. But we do have an obligation to care for the individual in our care at the time. The think small position that Beckmeyer and Butterfield talked about is part of the responsibility of the individual nurse and is actually a piece of providing the very best care for the whole. I feel the individual approach is important and it needs to be a primary consideration because it is the individual that may choose and dictate his or her own care, especially with the changing climate of individuals realizing they have the power to participate. It wasn't so with the rise of the paternalistic medical model, but it is now. We have the obligation to provide care for everyone and work with each person to have access to care, but somewhere in there, we have the obligation of educating the individual related to the choices that they have. In the article that we chose, how experienced providers gain knowledge, Vaughn makes the very good point that a doctor could give a nurse permission to act, but accountability cannot be transferred to another person. In the same way, a nurse can research needs, educate, and advocate for the individual and promote healthcare equity in the community, but the ultimate responsibility for the care that people need and want lies with the need, the choice, the desire of the individual, the end consumer of that care. We can meet those needs by empirically educating ourselves as nurses, applying the moral judgment for the right care to that person, and being aware of patterns that arise in practice that affect care, and know ourselves for what we have or do not have to offer the individual we're caring for. And Benjamin's going to take over the next part here.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go over my opinion. In her article, Vaughn stated that Carper's fundamental patterns of knowing can be utilized to help practitioners organize and structure thoughts when it comes to patient and family care. She believes that in an era where nursing autonomy and accountability continues to increase, so should one's ability to provide excellent holistic care. And that is why Carper's framework offers a starting point for practitioners as they determine how to best care for patients and their families, which definitely I would agree with that. Vaughn understands that in an ever evolving world, change is going to occur. We should therefore have a solid framework to go by to keep up with this change. And Carper's fundamentals of knowing definitely help with that. These are kind of some of the areas that we've seen changing. Nurses have more autonomy than before, according to Vaughn. Social justice is believed to have become more complicated for nurses and advanced practice nurses than it was before. And that was kind of talked about in the article by Beckemeyer and Butterfield. And then before, the thought was that social justice has to do more with genetics, personal choices, and access to treatment services. But now they're realizing that the research is indicating that it's more to do with things that pertain to politics, environmental, and social factors as well. So that's changing there in regards to social justice. We must understand, however, that nurses have worked towards combating these changes. Here's a couple of ways. For one, larger percentage of nurses are now working outside of the hospital in the community, providing preventative care, trying to prevent things from happening in order that they don't have to go to the hospital. They're also increasing the ability for advanced practice nurses to practice with full authority. I know many of the states are changing. Every year, a new state is adding on nurse practitioners who can practice independently. And even the VA system recently changed where now all of their nurse practitioners can practice independently throughout the U.S. And that has a lot to do with what nurses have been doing in our political area and whatnot. Nursing does not seem to have lost its way in social justice. Even in a more complex world, the nursing community continues to make steps towards a more socially just world. So kind of in conclusion, Carper's fundamental patterns of knowing restates to the individual nurse and how he or she comes to understand the holism that Vaughn refers to. The holism we seek is in reference to each individual, both patient and nurse, who makes up the community and how that tapestry is woven together. It's everybody's responsibility. When a nurse is armed with knowledge of the needs of the community, the nurse has the obligation to improve and incorporate this knowledge. And although social justice is more complicated than ever, the individual nurse still has a say and a responsibility to the community he or she serves. This doesn't mean that they are responsible to provide the healthcare needs of all. It just means that healthcare is a partnership between the practitioner, the patient, the family, and the community being served. Without a whole partnership, looking at the entire picture, the nurse may fall short or miss the mark of what is needed or wanted by the individual and therefore the community. So that kind of sums up our article and our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good.